At WGI, serving our clients with respect and the utmost in professionalism is central to our mission and corporate culture. We do that by using recognized experts to provide exceptional training to our team. We leverage technology, and we constantly work to build a brand that makes everyone proud. Our work serves the public, therefore the most important aspect of our efforts is to produce projects that are safe, economic to build, and provide the innovation our clients want and need to be successful. Our team is here to talk about WGI and the advances we've made during the past several years. We've grown to more than 400 professionals and were ranked number 4 by the Zwei Group as the top 100 fastest growing firms in 2017. We've also been recognized on the Inc. 5000 list that honors the extraordinary journeys of the fastest growing companies in America. It is the most prestigious honor for growing private businesses and business leaders. We're proud of our success and are continually adding new services and new professionals to meet our clients' needs. Last year, WGI worked in 32 states and 3 countries providing engineering, landscape architecture, planning, survey, parking solutions, environmental services, architecture, and traffic analysis. And WGI uses the latest technology available to our profession like LiDAR, drones, 3D modeling, and cloud-based document sharing. In 2018 and beyond, WGI will build on our past successes to help you meet your goals in the 21st century.
Thank you. Good morning. I hope you enjoyed that message from our CEO. I am Walter Kloss, the Vice President at WGI, and started up the Clay County office here in Fleming Island back in 2011, and have watched our company grow and embrace innovation and new technologies. In fact, one of our recent hires that we just are announcing is we've just hired on a Chief Innovation Officer that comes from with very high credentials in the DC area, and is to help our organizations transform to the changing mobility model that you're going to be hearing. If anyone wants to know more about WGI and our services, you can see me or others at our table here after the presentations and today's luncheon. And finally, I had a pleasure of meeting and spending some time with our keynote speaker, Jeff, at the TPO facilities. If you haven't been over there, it's a really neat facilities that they do have, and the connectivity to all the different functions over there. And you're in for a treat for his presentation, because I was only scheduled to be there for an hour, and it was about 2.5 hours later. We had to hopefully let him go about doing his daily activities, and the same with us. And so his knowledge and passion for smart technologies is very apparent. So thank you, and enjoy Jeff's presentation. Thank you.
Very appreciative to be here. I know some of you have probably sat in some environments where we've talked a little bit about this, but this is a really unique opportunity. As a transportation planning organization, and our mission predominantly is to oversee federal funding for traditionally roads, that's not what we're here to talk about today. So as I mentioned to the earlier group, we're not going to talk about the First Coast Expressway, and we're not going to talk about road projects in Clay County. We're really going to talk to you about an evolution that transportation is leading in the space of smart cities. And we'll talk about what that means, innovation and technology, and why we find ourselves in this environment. It's a unique opportunity that we have going forward. So I'll kind of work through this. I'm honestly okay with if somebody raises your hand, because I think there's parts along this that may interest you. You may forget by the end, so I'm okay with that. If not, that's fine too. Never do a presentation without this backdrop, however. We as the TPO, we're a federally mandated agency. By way of a backdrop, there are 27 versions of us in Florida. We are all doing transportation planning for the various areas that we represent. We all tell this same story when we do our 20-year long-range plan. A plan with needs well in excess of our revenue that we have coming in. So a massive gap that you see over that 20-year period, $13 billion in gap when we look at all the federal, local, and state funds. So that is the backdrop. We are not unique. That is every city and every state in the country. But it does paint a picture of why we have to think differently of how we deal with transportation and how we evolve into that. This is that $14 million in the long-range plan, how we've developed those funding opportunities. Again, 27 years in this, I would suggest to you that in the earlier long-range plans back in the day, We predominantly were focusing on those two columns. Most investments were simply in roads and transit. Those are not bad things, but they're also other opportunities. We've evolved over time to address more in the community aspect nature with bike and ped. We've also tied much more economic development to our decisions on what corridors we're investing in. So freight really creates that component, that it's not solely now making the investments to fix a 2-hour commute time. It's looking at corridors that we get high ROI when we make those investments. But really the conversation today is going to be much more about this evolution in that last column. I call it technology. That's the reality of what it is. FHWA and DOT call it Transportation System Management and Operation, TSM&O. Technology and innovation is the simple term for what that is, and it kind of gives you some context of how we get there. So this is our story for the last 15 years in technology. Many of you knew ITS at the time when you were driving the interstates and saw dynamic message signs that DOT had put out. You saw some cameras and things of that nature. What we started to do at the TPO level, and this was kind of getting 4 counties and 10 elected officials from those counties and 5 transportation authorities to think differently of how we make investments in the future. Using technology to squeeze more out of our current infrastructure was the original intent back in 2003 when we started this conversation. So 15 years later, what we've been making investments in as the TPO now is deploying on the arterials, closed circuit television, new signal controllers in every intersection box so that we trend away from having a bucket truck go out to each intersection in time. We could control that stuff from a computer and start to manage the system. We've deployed a number of technologies called Bluetooth. It's essentially Bluetooth sensors along the roadways. So we are pinging Bluetooth signals, whether it's your kids in the back playing video games or your phone or your car, and it's able to give us real-time travel flow every second on the roadways. We don't know it's you. That's important to know. We don't know it's you. But it does give us real-time travel flow, and it starts to trend towards the ability to real-time management of the system. One of the unique things that this initiative over time has done was really reveal to us what really was more relevant to the commuter in transportation. When you look at national surveys, it's far more about the reliability of your commute time than it is your commute time. What does that mean? I'm good with 35 minutes. What frustrates me is 4, 5, 6 times a month, it's an hour because of an incident or something. And that's much more important to me than if I can reduce it to 33 minutes. It's about the reliability measure. And that meant for us creating an environment now where we were connecting with first responders. Crash occurs, we respond to the incident, we manage that system, and one day can we actually move you to a parallel corridor and change the signals from the computer and create better flow on parallel roads and reduce the overall delay and improve the travel time reliability. That's what we learned, and clearly now from the feds, that's what they want. Performance measures that are in the travel time reliability space. So that backdrop is to tell you that we've had significant engagement with our first responders. We have had a coalition that's existed for over a decade now with upwards of 100 members in this space, both private and public, towards those investments. And that gets us to a sidebar of road weather sensors. As we participated with our first responders, we learned in many cases that during hurricanes they were standing on bridges like this with wind gauges, and that's how decisions were made to open and close bridges. We saw an opportunity, and the board supported it, to deploy wind sensors on all the roads, so that on all the bridges in our region. So now it's pulling real-time information, and in exchange for that wind information, NOAA is actually providing satellite capabilities for all of our sensors, so we have no communications costs. So there's a relationship and a cross-sharing of data that sort of created already this platform for smart cities that I'm going to share with you. So we've been deploying hundreds of miles of this infrastructure. The next thing was get rid of phone protocol between our responders, put them all in one room, have them operate all together. And that's what we did. Another board-supported activity, a real challenge. I like to challenge the board. And I think Diane was on the board during then. I know Wayne wasn't. But it was an opportunity to really exercise and understand that there is regional asset in transportation as it relates to, frankly, a building. So we were able to invest $11 million in federal funds to build a 25,000 square foot regional transportation management center in downtown Jacksonville. I would encourage any of you to come up and tour it. It's literally home to Florida Highway Patrol, DOT, Fish and Wildlife, Fire and Rescue, JSO, and opportunities for anyone else. And it is a NASA-looking facility with video walls and cameras, and we are managing everything real time in that facility. And so that's kind of the backdrop for how we've gotten to this new era of smart region. In 2016, the U.S. Department of Transportation dropped a $40 million challenge grant on the U.S. and was going to award it to one city under the premise of smart city. The way DOT operates, they don't always know exactly what they want out of a new program, so they offer a whole bunch of money to one and let them work through it to ultimately develop how that program is supposed to look. So I would suggest to you they didn't exactly know everything they had in mind, but they had an idea of what they wanted to do. So we were able to submit something for this area, the backdrop being that building, the infrastructure. We framed the application to put out more of the infrastructure. 72 cities applied. Columbus, Ohio was awarded the $40 million. And then Paul Allen threw in an extra $10 million for automated vehicle testing, and you're sitting there with $50 million. The 70 other cities, including us, had applications deploying more infrastructure. Columbus, Ohio had an infant mortality rate 4 times the national average in 3 communities. They had a community issue as opposed to an infrastructure deployment. And they hit a sweet spot for what DOT had in mind. How do you solve community challenges and issues, whether they're pedestrian fatalities, traffic issues, opioid addiction, everything? This wasn't a transportation conversation. And how do you do it in a more comprehensive way? And so we sort of heard that and came back and said, we didn't get the money, but we can still move forward with some of the things we're hearing. We met with US DOT in Washington. We had opportunities to vet the conversation and then frame a message that we didn't know whether it would resonate or not here in our community, but we did it anyway. And so we started to move in this direction. We laid out a roadmap, no timelines, no expectations, but based on conversations with US DOT, something that we felt like would either happen organically or it wouldn't happen at all. Everything in our world begins with a plan, but we had other ideas in mind as we went forward. We developed a plan. We developed in the transportation space, and I'll walk you through what this diagram means. What's unique to Smart City, in particular, again, as we continue to vet it with DOT, 2 unique things that Smart City offers, and that's ladders of opportunity and then the economic development aspect. What are ladders of opportunity? Low-income communities with a lot of intellectual capital, with obstacles, not just transportation, but other services that are limiting their ability to succeed in the community. Growth, from an economic development perspective, this new world of innovation and technology, much of it being deployed outside of the U.S., creates the prospects of introducing those industries into the U.S. for Buy America reasons. And then ultimately, if you're a community really in this space, you'd have the opportunity to ultimately land, whether it's an automated vehicle manufacturer, technology, software developers, or any of the above in your community. So those were 2 things they had in mind outside of normal objectives in the transportation space. The other unique part that we kept hearing from them was it isn't about as much about the technology, the toys we showed you, and some more. It's far more about the data behind that, the Internet of Things. Could you aggregate the data and create solutions to community issues in a way unique from what we're currently doing? And that's what we heard. If you look around the country and you Google smart cities, you're going to see San Diego, Kansas City, Austin, a lot of innovative spaces. And you're going to see them all taunting automated vehicle shuttles and all the really neat toys that we all are excited about having. And they're going to declare themselves a smart city off of that. But what they're not doing is integrating and building the data environment that's going to allow us to change how our communities function. We heard it. We think the rest don't do it because that's not what makes the front page of a paper in a good way, because it's not really something to talk about. We've decided that's the most important part. If you could build a regional data exchange environment and intersect disparate data systems, not just in transportation, but all sectors, then you crack the code for what's the first smart city, smart community in the country. And so that's really the space with which we've been moving in, and I'll kind of talk you through that. We are going to do some cool toys, though. We have a lot of them in mind. A lot of them are driven, in fact, because we've already created, perception is as good as reality in some cases. We've created this idea already that we are progressive in this smart city, smart community space. And so we've had vendors from the Silicon Valley and New Zealand and other places around the world come into our community and want to deploy their systems at their cost in some cases to use us to be able to test the systems to even understand do they work, and then create the opportunities for them to deploy elsewhere. So we rank top 5 in Jacksonville in pedestrian fatalities on an annual basis. There are now technologies that we can look at, from PED sensor systems that can now detect pedestrian movement, communicate that to the vehicle, even communicate that to downstream signals and turn them red and reduce vehicular conflict. Opportunities to test that stuff. Flood sensors. We have vendors now that are coming in that we have the opportunity to deploy flood sensors within the storm drains that can provide earlier detection of the conditions and give us just earlier and better opportunities to develop that. Could we integrate those systems into signals on parallel roads, so as the water elevates, you know more cars are moving to the parallel road? Could those could those signals change and address that? Gate notification, not as much to Clay County, but this is really from a JAXPort perspective. Random closures of the port gates and then trucks parked all up and down the road. Could we create a notification system now so a driver in Kingsland knows that the gates are closed for the next hour, so he stays at Burger King and doesn't come into the community and be part of the problem? None of this stuff is futuristic. These are all technologies already being used, just not being integrated into an environment to solve some of our challenges. Rail notification. You live in Clay County, but you've all been to Baptist Hospital, right? You know what I'm talking about when the rail is parked there. That's just an example. We're deploying rail notifications now that can offer now real time the expected time of the train to an intersection. So for instance, first responder now knows they will not make it before that train and they can divert to another hospital earlier based on the conditions of patients in the back. So really kind of thinking about this in all contexts. Really unique is a company that's in town called TTS that wants to deploy what they call a green wave system. So this is a system that will tell you the speed to be driving to reach every intersection at the right time. So you don't speed up and stop, speed up and stop. Secondarily, and I guarantee you if I ask, no one will raise their hand, but I also guarantee you that every one of you do it. It will do a countdown to green at the intersection, so you put your phone down and you're ready to drive back through the intersection instead of waiting for the person behind you to honk and say go. And what they want to do is deploy it, see that it works, understand how it works, and whether or not it actually does what it's intended to do. But it's creating the backdrop for an environment now that's accepting and willing of that innovation space, the demographic, frankly, that every community is trying to capture. If you've ever been down to the Jags game, you may or may not have seen the test track that JTA is running right now with automated vehicles. Vendors are rolling vehicles in every 6 months, and they're able to test them for a large deployment that's going to happen actually in downtown Jacksonville. And we're having conversations now with JEA to look at some smart lighting deployment systems. So this is a scenario that's not just LED. These are smart lighting systems that have modules, anything from environmental sensors to law enforcement security like shot spotters and the like, to variable lighting levels, to save energy when there's no activity, and to increase illumination when there is, to account for that, and the ability to integrate PED sensors and other things. Because on the backdrop of all these conversations too are the aesthetics of having 10 cameras and 5G cell antennas and everything else mounted to poles. The ability to integrate all this into a tasteful environment is also part of that conversation. And then we are thinking aspirational too in the space of like solar roads and solar paths to generate sufficient energy to run some of our lights and do things. So we have all these thoughts in mind. So we talked about data. This is the ocean and the big idea that we have. And this again is on the backdrop of a DOT in Washington that says they think that smart cities, because again, embedded in all of this is the data that's coming from it. The idea that they think in a smart city environment that we could create a model that isn't solely then dependent on recurring public funding to sustain it. Because the value proposition of data today, the ability for entrepreneurs and innovators to develop apps and businesses off of that data creates a value proposition that then creates an opportunity for private investment in it to help support it. That's what we heard, again, not knowing if that would make sense. So we laid out this ocean. This is not just transportation. Transportation is the conduit to the conversation. This is everything from safety to transportation to health and human services to smart building systems to anything and everything. Could we build a cloud with a regional open data exchange? We are not going to boil that ocean today, and we are smart enough to know that we should do this and under a proof of concept and see could we do it. This is the first thing we started to introduce. And no disrespect to Clay or St. John's or Nassau who are within our region, I vetted this with the board to make them know for the last 18 months this has been a sole engagement with Jack's Chamber to see whether or not this thing made sense before we went out through the rest of the region. And what happened is this: we have access to every committee, every board, everyone within the chamber. This message here is what resonated. This message here is what revealed a tech community in Northeast Florida that we never knew existed. Everything from two guys in a beach house in Atlantic Beach to aggressive small tech companies doing Department of Defense experiments and technology investments, all doing investments outside of our community because our community has not been in a position to really nurture them and engage them and create opportunities for them. And we discovered them because they want to be part of this. The ability for them to invest and develop this data model and the ability for them then to sell that to other cities creates a value proposition to us because we don't pay for it. And that's exactly what's happened. We're developing a proof of concept that creates that opportunity. We have a local startup that's partnered with our consultant, and they are developing it partially funded by us with public funds and the rest in-kind and private investment through joint ventures to stand that up. This is how I'm telling our elected officials kind of how we're thinking about this. We have a lot of public services that are happening all over our region, and all of them different types of systems that are collecting data, whether it's traffic, whether it's first responders, whether it's airlines or parking. And in that world, we'll use parking as the example. If we have a parking system, you're going to pay for data storage, whether it's a server or cloud. You're going to pay for IT support. You're going to pay for the software subscription. And if you're doing it right, you're going to pay for the data science and analytics to really evaluate that data and make you more efficient. And you're going to pay all those costs on a repetitive nature. And then by sector, you're creating those silos and further and further. So whether you're parking and then public works, whether you're health and human services, utility, it's all being done in silo and disparate. So you're repeating those costs over and over, and you're not getting the value of the data being integrated. So could we create an environment that has single repository and builds in the data model that allows that? And so you get three things from that. You get the capital cost savings to a utility who's about to roll out and invest in a massive data lake for smart metering. Could they cost share into that environment instead for capital savings or your parking management or any of the other? And could they also then, based on that, they're now getting the value of other data that's not even within their environment that they can integrate and create analytics to that to even be more efficient in how they operate. And then on top of that, the ability to build automation into it. This idea is what resonated with the local tech community. That donut, per se, is what they're developing, the data model, the cloud-based platform, and what we're going to do is have a product that comes out of that for transportation. So I'm the first customer as well as it gets developed. I'm the first customer in that we have those federal performance measures. And traditionally, every 5 years, we go get a bunch of data, we throw it in a spreadsheet, and we produce a paper document, and then 5 years later, we go do that exercise over again. In this environment now, our consultants are developing the data model, same data, 200 data sources, but same data. But now I'm not going to get just my paper document. Because this system now will be living and breathing, I'm now getting real-time dashboard and analytics, real-time based on the data coming from our command center to static data with all the performance measures that we have to meet. And at any moment, based on the data being updated in that, My targets are telling me whether we're on track to meet the federal performance measures and follow the rules that we're supposed to do. And that same dynamic occurs whether you're in economic development, wanting a more real-time analytics for metrics on candidates that are considering your community, or whether you're a parking system that wants to do analytics. So this is what's really kind of creating that environment. How do you get to them? You don't get to them at an event like this. You get to them in warehouses over beer and pizza. You get to them at Mosh after hours, presenting to them in the planetarium, talking to 102 local software developers and startups. Or you get to them by making an attempt at hosting a tech and beer event. And so we did. And we did that last month. And we did that, and we had 125 startups, venture capitalists, and tech owners come in and engage in a very fluid environment to connect ideas and connect together with investment. And this is the new era of economic development. When you listen now to Andre Wallace, who's with Jax USA, he says, the idea of economic development isn't just anymore going to try to attract a headquarters to locate in your community. Because this demographic is looking for quality of life, not the job. It's not the job driving them to the community. It's a quality of life issue. And if we could then, economic development, connect money to their idea develops, and then they exist here and grow. It's a whole different dynamic of how you attack that sector. It doesn't mean you don't chase headquarters, but it's a whole nother element. And it's the element that every chamber and economic arm wants, is that demographic now, that millennial entrepreneurial creator demographic that you want in your community. And so it's the ability to do that. And I'm not saying they don't all not want to be members of chambers or something like that. But as a whole, they function more fluid, a lot less formal, and you have the opportunity to turn that into them being part of our solution in solving our community issues. The validation for that was Jax USA. They rolled out their 5-year strategic plan, Elevate, a few months back, and they identified 4 pillars, 3 very traditional for economic development, workforce development, branding, industry cluster. But they identified preeminent smart region as their differentiator for Northeast Florida as it relates to competing in the country. So to me, this is somewhat of a validation that the last 18 months through the Chamber and Jax USA engagement that the message is resonating. Today is a validation that you have an interest, and therefore it's the opportunity to resonate. Last month, we were in front of the St. Johns County Economic Development Commission breakfast, neither of which did we seek it. It was an ask. So the message is starting to get out there, and the opportunity for us now to grow regionally in this space. Why is this important for Jax USA? Because this is not now the story that says, as Jacksonville grows, the region grows. That's not what this is. The smart region, smart city space allows as every possible use case is addressed in any locality. If we're in Green Cove Springs, there's something very specific to Green Cove Springs that they have a problem with. And in the smart city environment, we can create a solution to that problem that's very specific to Green Cove. So a message now from Jax USA is, as Green Cove grows and as Nassau and Fernandina grow, the aggregate of all of those systems, the region grows. That's the story behind why we believe that it is the differentiator from an economic perspective. So we got all these vendors calling. They got all these neat things they want to put out. Rather than have vendor A on road A and vendor B on B, and the other guy has this other app and he's on road C, we started to see the market potential of one single corridor. Could we develop an innovation corridor? Could we develop other signature projects in the region in each of our counties to allow this opportunity to go forward? Our biggest signature project to date that we've rolled out is the Bay-Jax Innovation Corridor. The premise behind this is all those interesting toys, from flood sensors to smart lighting to PED sensors to law enforcement, all integrated on a single corridor. You may or may not have heard 2 weeks ago, Secretary Elaine Chao from DOT was in, and we received $25 million in federal funding for the corridor. So this is Bay Street in downtown Jacksonville, from essentially the JTA's Regional Transportation Center by the old convention center they're building, to Shad Khan's $2.2 billion economic development project on the east, and then everything in between, creating a corridor for all of that infrastructure. It has its own website now, thebayjax.com, if you want to go watch a video that's pretty cool. virtual reality video in the quarter, and really make you think about the ideas. This is not pie in the sky. There's real money attached to this and the ability to deploy this. And what the quarter's done already is create three things. We started this as infrastructure. The chamber sees this as a marketing tool to capture that demographic downtown. And now that we found that sector, that culture, we're also creating a place. So the Bay becomes the location with which that culture meets and does their meetups and their tech and beers. And so you're creating a whole environmental aspect. And this is repeatable in the rest of the region. Jaguar Shipyards, real quick, that's what it's going to look like theoretically. What's important to this is the Jaguars invested. They invested in what we were talking about, and they flipped the script. So the design won't change, the structures won't change from their ideas. But they now recognize the value of creating this from the internet up. A fully integrated development that has smart building concepts and integrated and connected data systems that addresses that new environment. This is Cordish, an international developer for the Jaguars. Cordish as an industry has gone out now to rethink their business model in the future to make sure they're accounting for smart city elements in their development. So we know this kind of stuff is resonating and making an impact. Other projects in the region, just so that I can make sure, so that you know there's other flavors we're already engaging with. I'm not suggesting these are as mature yet as others, and I'm going to throw one out in Clay County that I know isn't matured yet, but it's something we're looking to do. St. Augustine is our sort of micro signature project for parking management, and it rolled out 2 weeks ago. So they have all their parking systems. We were able to come in and work with them now to connect their three systems, lots, garages, and meters, and those systems are now talking to each other, so they're now getting real-time analytics for parking space availability all the time. So they now know how their systems are working. They also know now that their policy is messed up because they're charging more for the garage than the meters, and they can see that reflected in the analytics based on how people are parking. So now they can policy test pricing. But if you saw, and now eventually in the world of analytics, the historical data now predicts when they can expect heavier loads. So the first rollout was 2 weeks ago. You can now pay by app. So now you can go to St. Augustine, put in your license plate, and you can park anywhere, and you can pay. And there are Priuses running around that are pinging your tag to make sure you're a parker. What it means, too, is they can offer less price now to their residents by virtue of knowing that they're a resident. Eventually, the meters will be removed. Eventually, there will be an interface that you will detect a parking space, and it will tell you, turn right, there's a space. And you eliminate the traffic flowing through St. Augustine just going in circles. Here's our idea. This is not specifically to Clay County, but this is that signature idea to test this stuff, just like the parking. So we got this idea behind when we start to look at, and this is not an indictment of Clay, this is most every county. The state is running all the state roads every year, testing pavement condition for resurfacing programs. But for the most part, even across the country, at the local level, you're not really doing that. And so a lot of that is predicated on either residents calling for potholes and a more subjective approach on how you rank your funding for pavement management. So in this world of innovation, could we create a system that could actually detect that real time? And so we've been looking for vendors, and we found one. A company called Robotics has developed machine learning analytics that goes into a smartphone and mounts to the back of a rearview mirror. And it's been taught all cracks and ruts and imperfections in a roadway. And so our big idea is mounting that to sanitation trucks or other county fleets that are running every road all the time. And then you have a data-driven maintenance schedule. Some have said we could be watching the glacier melt. Others have said it might be useful. I don't know the answer to that, but we're prepared to fund the test case of about 200 miles for $8,000. And if you're okay with it, we're prepared to do it in your county. It doesn't harm you in any way. And we would have the opportunity to assess this system based off of DOT's information. We can benchmark the state roads and see whether this system gets to a point. Immensely cost-effective, data-driven process instead of subjective. And more importantly, they've already learned in some cities because of historical data, they're now able to predict the pothole before it actually happened. So that's the kind of stuff that we're talking about. So I'll leave you with this kind of where we're at. So we talked about our integrated data exchange and the proof of concept. and that proof of concept is the project for us. We will be rolling a demo out hopefully this month that will start to show you the value. I will tell you that what we're rolling out is already a value to you because the transportation data we're pulling in and the performance measures are not only broken down by county, but then aggregate back to the region. So what we're paying for and what's privately being developed for us already is embedded with a Clay County element to it. So you're going to have a resource that's going to feed off of real-time data and analytics for your transportation system as an initial rollout for what we're doing. Long-term, we look to more specific uses to the county, what you want, and add additional metrics and elements to that. I will tell you, it doesn't come free, okay? We have an opportunity for private investment in public, but long-term, we have to prove value to it, and then we cost share to make that work. The quarter, we have $1 million in TPO funds in July 1st, the $12.5 million build grant plus local state match to start that quarter project. Potential other projects. What's interesting is it's not about all the futuristic toys like AV. When you start talking at the public works level, if we can solve waste collection and parking management, we're gold. So we're looking at projects now, particularly in garbage collection with RFID chips and smart systems that are actually telling you full or empty. So you have the ability, one, for waste haulers to know how much garbage is in that neighborhood to mobilize trucks. But more importantly, you stop the public from calling in and saying they didn't pick up my garbage. Because you know the garbage, you know what's in it, and it also automatically now is creating callbacks to be picked up. We're also working with the Jaguars for game day experience in terms of new parking systems and eventually real-time systems now that say if you leave your house now, it's 36 minutes for the Jag game based on traffic demand. So we're looking at opportunities with that. We're developing a coalition. The TPO is not any one entity is appropriate to own this. This is more than transportation. It's law enforcement. It's all the things I mentioned. So we're looking to stand up a coalition of partners so that we are collaboratively owning the data exchange, so that we are collaboratively rolling out the decisions, so that we are collaboratively participating in Jack's tab, Tech and Beer, to become regional tab of some sort, so that we're engaging everyone in the region in that sector and help elevate you. That's what we want to do, is continue to engage them. And my close is this right here. And we feel really good about this next month. So this is a global Smart Cities Council, international base. This is a resource of expertise that are selecting about 4 cities every year. We applied 2 weeks ago for this readiness challenge. It's not money. It's a year's worth of expertise and resources to come in our community, offer the value of outside the U.S. who's far more progressive, to come in and do workshops and evaluate us and make sure we're on the path that makes sense. We submitted 2 weeks ago. The organization that puts on the global conference in San Diego in April called, and they want us to come out and participate in their showcase event in the conference. We're connecting dots that may not be there, but we're connecting a dot that says we think then we're probably one of the regions that will be recognized and selected for the coming year. We did submit as a region, not a city. We submitted as a coalition, and we submitted on projects beyond transportation. So we're actually doing a innovation lab with JEA for smart metering. So it's not just transportation. So that's something that will validate and really position us. So I've talked a long time. I told you I would. I was given to 105 though, so I got to 105. And I'm done. So I appreciate it. I hope it was entertaining and informative. It was not roads, I told you that. But I think it is the direction that we're heading. And I think it has a massive relationship between public and private sector that never existed before. And we're not privatizing anything. We are leveraging together with the private sector to elevate our community. So, thank you.
Imagine a city that connects people, places, and information effortlessly. A city that uses data to make the most of our time and resources and keep us safe. Imagine a smart city that improves the lives of the people who live, work, and visit there. Together, we can make this a reality. The North Florida Smart Region Coalition partners are working together now to bring this idea of a smart city to life right here in Jacksonville. Let's explore how the Bayjacks, an innovation corridor along Bay Street, will be an important first step in creating a safer, smarter region. turning Jacksonville and North Florida into a rising center for technology jobs, e-commerce, telecommunications, and education. Today, Bay Street is our gateway through downtown Jacksonville, connecting people with residences, jobs, and entertainment destinations, including hotels, restaurants, nightclubs, Daly's Place, our sports complexes, and the shipyards. Tomorrow, the Bayjacks will be an innovation corridor that elevates the experience for residents, businesses, and visitors. Imagine having the information needed to meet your shopping, entertainment, and mobility needs in real time on your phone. You can use automated vehicles to reach destinations along the corridor and have access to more affordable mobility. Sensors know when you cross the street and notify drivers to reduce crashes. Signals are connected to vehicles to optimize traffic flow. The electricity needed to power the signals and lighting in the corridor is generated in the sidewalks using solar panels. During storms, flood warning sensors provide time to evacuate safely. And finally, lanes change colors to direct traffic for special events. As public agencies, businesses, and individuals share data to improve efficiencies, our smart city will become a catalyst for innovation, technology jobs, and new development. But how does it work? It all begins with developing an integrated data exchange, the process for collecting and sharing data. We'll install fiber optics, sensors, signals, and other devices to collect and transmit data. Instead of having information in silos, we'll develop software and analytics to tie all the information together and add value. The data will be available to the public to spawn further innovation and business opportunities. Imagine combining up-to-the-minute flight times, airport terminal security wait times, parking availability, and traffic will let you know when to leave for your trip. Becoming a smart region will elevate Jacksonville and North Florida to a rising center for e-commerce, telecommunications, and education. Welcome to the future. We look forward to seeing you on the Bay.